This is inside the living room, and I've been experimenting with some rigid board insulation. I taped it on. I just wanted to see what would happen. Now over here in the bedroom, that window, I never put any insulation on, so that was my control. This window, I just hauled the insulation off less than a minute ago, and the window immediately fogged up. I felt a big rush of cold air when I pulled it out, and I stuck my hand in there. It was very cold. Now over here you can see we've got 65, for this wall it was 66 earlier, and then as I bring it closer, look at that, 39. That's what the wall was over here. So 39 to 65 between the two areas, that's a significant temperature difference because of the 2 inches of rigid foam that I had up here. So it worked well. Now obviously taping insulation in place doesn't help. Like, you don't get the ventilation, you don't get the light from it. So that's not something that is like a long-term solution. But it was fun to experiment with. Here's a winter morning. Backside, north side of the house. These 2 windows are for the living room, and I kept the rigid board on in place, and as you can see, it's clean, so there's no condensation, and this rigid board is still taped in place. Same with this one, still taped in place. Now that window was my control that I never put any insulation on. This window, I had taken the insulation off, and then I put it back in place without the masking tape, so it's not air sealed. It's still pretty good. It's fairly tight. I cut it close, but you can never get it perfect because of cutting the foam board and the drywall. And as you can see, there's condensation building. Now this has only been in place for 24 hours. And there's condensation building, and where there's a little crack down in the bottom inside, I could actually feel cold air coming out. So this is kind of like a convective loop circulating the air from the bedroom constantly against this window and forming condensation against the outside colder surface now. So that's why it's so important that if you're going to do interior shutters, they got to be airtight, which is so difficult to do. Here's back inside the bedroom, and I close the door and turn off the light, and you can see that the crack around it is less than 1% of the whole area. This crack down here, you can see how big it is. I mean, so that's less than 1/4 of an inch, and this one over here as well is less than 1/4 of an inch. So it's pretty good along the edges, but because of that crack, and it doesn't matter if they're even smaller, so long as it's a pinprick, you'll always get air to flow, and the bigger the gap, the faster that air is going to move from in the bedroom to, or any room that you have this on, and it circulates, and so the air is moving in, the warm moist air is moving in, and then it's condensating out against the window, and then down here at the bottom it's leaking out. And putting my fingers here, I can feel that. So let me demonstrate with the the infrared camera here, or excuse me, the temperature. Oh, there we go, 72. It's difficult, the 2 different angles, I got to make it work. And then if I drop this right down into here, so changing up a little bit, but about 60. So you can tell it's, good 12 degrees or so cooler right here on this wood spot. And I can feel that cold air coming in. So that's circulating the air back behind. And that's why shutters or any of your insulation always has to be air sealed. And there you go, I just hauled it off. And you can tell there's no condensation up here, and that's because the air was still warm. So it still kept the glass warm right at this spot. And then the glass was colder and colder and colder as it got down. And all the way down here, let's see. Over here, we've got some drops. So you see that? Liquid water, not on the glass, but actually on the sash. I don't see any puddling. So at this point in the game, I haven't done any damage. Now it's only been 24 hours, but the point is that if you continued this, eventually these droplets down here would start puddling, and then they would touch the wood frame, and they could cause the wood frame to rot. This would be over the course of a long period of time. But all these anomalies, all these events, they happen all the time inside wall cavities. And this is what we're always trying to think about. That's why people say not to put vapor barriers on the outside. Now I have a vapor barrier on the outside of my walls, and that's the grease, ice, and water. But the difference is that my insulation is dense packed right up against the window. So right where my hand would be, it's touching. And so because that insulation would be touching and it's dense packed, it's not allowing for the convective loop. Now cellulose insulation is not an air barrier. Like this glass, air barrier. 100% no air is ever going to get through glass. Same with grease, ice, and water. 100% air barrier and vapor barrier. But cellulose is an airflow retarder. So it slows down airflow, and it does not support convective looping, meaning that that loop that had just happened naturally from that movement, if this whole space was filled with cellulose, that could not occur. So it doesn't have to be airtight so long as you stop the air from blowing against it. So any wind that drives against the window from the outside wouldn't get in. Anyways, a few differences, but I'm going to take this off now. Now if you had shutters that were not airtight, just like this panel was, but you moved it every day and you always let the light in and you only had this in place at night, then this level of condensation, which is probably more than you'd actually get because this was after 24 hours, and you'd only have it up there for maybe 12 hours, say. And then you had 12 hours off, 12 hours on, 12 hours off. Well, this is going to evaporate back out into the room. So in theory you could do it, but you'd have to always be on the ball. If you left it in place for several days, you'd have to worry about puddling starting to occur, and then after several weeks, rot starting to occur, mold, and you don't want that. Things to think about.